I'd like to go over some of the basic perceptions that we have in the Sufi training, which are Shariah, Tariqa, Haqqiqa, and Maarifat. This is mostly a review of material that we've done before. I think of it as like a bark of a tree, in the sense that it's what we find in almost all sacred texts around the world relating to good or proper action in relation with the divine and with other people. It's a healthy way to please your heart. Your heart is happy when it is within this moral compass. It gives us a direction about what is good and bad in relation to what is a healthy relationship with the world and with our heart. Now, some people think of Sharia as that's the law. This is how things are to be. But as a protection for the essence, it's more of just a way of protecting the heart of the tree. That's all. It's there to protect. Tariqa is like the leaves of the tree, and it's several different elements that make it up. One is acknowledging the need for help. We can't do this facing oneself by ourselves. It just doesn't work. You come to a certain point and there's always an obstacle that you can't get by. So that's when you decide, I need help, and you have to find a creditable guide, someone that has authority given to them by someone else with authority, so that there's an ongoing, verifiable lineage. Otherwise, it turns into a cult. A cult to me is when somebody decides to be a teacher and says that they have had the ascended masters come to them and they've channeled Seth and talked to the dead or whatever. So that's kind of a cult, if there's nobody that's looking out for the teacher. And Tariqa is when you decide that you want to change your behavior. You don't like the habits that you have now, and you want to learn how to synchronize your mind with your heart. And you do this through the guidance of the teacher. You want to correct your useless identities and attachments. And you do this through your individual work, and within the school of training, you learn how to act with other people in a better way than you would, say, with your blood family. Haqqiqa, thinking of it as like the branches of the tree, is that this is experiential. You understand the truth viscerally. You understand why the sacred texts talk about the need to do things in a certain way, because your heart is happiest when you are doing them, when you're being compassionate, when you're being of service, when you're helping others, when you are learning about yourself. These are the things that help. And then you also realize through Haqqiqa why we talk about surrender and why we talk about dying before you die. The thing is that when you get to this point, you also see that this is very different than how most people view the world. Meaning that in the Tarot, there's a card called the Hanged Man, where this guy is upside down, hanging from a large branch. And what that is he's seeing things how they really are, and things in that perspective are very different than what most people are observing. Quite different. However, the paradoxes that are happening here are that, yes, this is weird that people believe these things that they do and have all of these ambitions and desires that have nothing to do with how we're seeing reality. And so that means that we are going to be living with paradox, that things, though they may look a certain way, people are going to be acting completely differently and have a completely different set of ulterior motives. This is disorienting at first until you begin to realize, well, this is just how things are. This is Haqqiqa. This is the reality. Reality is a very different way of looking than most people do. Now, Maarifat is also existential in the sense that it is an experience of living in the moment with Allah. And in that sense, you are now available for Allah to do whatever work needs to be done through your hands and body, through service. So you're a representative, you're a Khalifa of Allah, and you do this through your words and actions. And the idea is that you are now representing the sacred texts, whatever they are, whether it's the Quran or the Tao Te Ching or the Torah or the Kabbalah, whatever it is. So anything you want to comment about any of this?
Perception of this one is that this getting through Haqqiqa and Maarifat is not a one-time thing, correct?
Correct.
This is an over and over again thing. And then the other perception is that in some ways there's a requirement for a bit of space and time to be put aside to focus on these things, not necessarily like majority of one's time, but at least a carved out piece of somewhere where you're not just doing the day-to-day stuff as much, that you focus on just to laugh for a little while. Doing that always feels like a fight with the rest of the world. And I just wonder, when there is very little space to see that as a separate thing, as something that you can focus on, is it just that it is in all of the surrounding things, and it is in all the day-to-day, and that's just a phase of life in which the outside becomes a lot more important for a while? Or is it something where you have to fight to keep that space? Like, I'm not sure which one is true, or if they're both true.
It's an interesting question, because in some cultures, the time is already set up during the day and the night, where you have the 5 calls to prayer, where it says, okay, let's take a break. Everybody, stop what you're doing. Remember Allah? Oh, yeah, right. Okay. And then back to work. So that's in some cultures. In our culture, you have to do what you need to do to keep the connection. It's not going to be done for you. It's a little harder.
So where that becomes tricky for this one is then there seems to be a bit of a tension that creeps in between the duties and requirements of the world and the need to disconnect, and then there's a perverse thing where there can be a nafs which is about where one gets stress and annoyed about the fact that one can't connect, which then interferes more with the connection.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
where
it
it's
does.
like
Of course.
trying to actually achieve the quiet space without the getting caught up in the conflict around the creation of the quiet space. I don't know if this is just for this one at the moment or if this is something other people resonate with, but that's the challenge here at the moment. Is there's many surrounding agendas, and that it's not just a choice thing anymore. It's more of it's actually one needs to be very insistent to preserve that space, and that can cause conflict in both home, workplace, and even I find even with Tariqa and like how if I have X amount of Tariqa time, but some of it is spent on logistical, worldly sort of stuff for Tariqa, and then it still doesn't leave much time for the quietness. So yeah, just wondering about all of that.
Yeah. A couple things. Where you're at now, actually, with any of these, let me approach it this way. For Haqqiqa and Maarifat and being completely involved in worldly activities, I think of it as like steeping, like tea steeping in hot water, where you want to make a nice cup of tea. The steeping is being totally integrated into the situation, whatever it is. I'll get to the other stuff in just a minute, but I was thinking about this yesterday and today about how we fight against learning what Allah is trying to show us, rather than going, this is what I need to be seeing now, otherwise I wouldn't be here. So in a way, it's yes and.
Yeah, it's more like the question is the lesson, let go, just go with what's going on, or is the lesson learn how to preserve a certain amount of connection time or whatever you call it, space?
There's the second part of that is the first part is you are learning how to see both Haqqiqa and Maarifat through this moment. This is where everything's happening. It doesn't work by going off into the desert for 40 days at this time.
Oh, no, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about 5 minutes.
I know. I understand. The other part of this is once you see whatever is happening at this moment is my lesson. This is Allah talking directly to me. I asked for this. This is how Allah is answering me. This moment. Secondly, as time begins to open up over the next couple of years, say in the next 10 years, there'll be larger and larger chunks of time where you find how valuable that is. You will value it more because of what you are experiencing now.
Yeah, don't know what it's got till it's gone kind of thing. Yeah.
So there's two things going on here. One, learning how to absorb what you need in this moment with whatever chaos is happening, and then loving it when the little breaks start to get a little larger and a little larger.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So it's more like a over the whole story, it all evens out, makes sense kind of thing, rather than everything has to be balanced in this moment.
Yeah, no. Not with
it's
two
more
girls,
of
three girls.
It's more of an in and out kind of. Yeah, I get it. I think so. Thank you. That helps.
Yeah, and finding it's okay to continue your dialogue and questions, but you'll
Yeah.
find it through your own environment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just more like there's that, maybe this is like old Catholic thing of, oh, I didn't go into zikr this week. That means I'm a bad Sufi, like, oh, I haven't done 5 prayers, like, is that bad? I haven't even done 1
Yes.
prayer. Is that bad? Am I a bad person? Like, so there's a lot of that going on, which it may be just old hang-ups, because the funny thing is that in a weird way, this one feels more connected than ever in general, because of all of the relationship stuff that's happening. The question is, if one feels that closeness is okay and the relationship is okay, does the form not matter so much? In that the playing with kids is prayer, the cooking is prayer, and if it's legit to see it that way, that makes more sense to this one, because it's not possible to do it in both ways at the same time. Like, you can't pray while you're cooking. Like, you can't do, salat. Like, you can zikr while you cook, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not quite the same when you're doing it a bit rather than the whole commitment to something.
You're doing everything you're doing out of love. Any questions about any of this or anything you wanted to discuss? Shariah, Tariqa, Haqqiqa, and Maarifat. They're different perspectives. They're different ways of seeing the world.
Is there any tie-in to the levels of the nafs, or is that kind of like
that's different.
Independent thing?
That's different. No, not in this sense. This is, as you work your way up through the nafs, these perception points begin to open and become available. They happen when you're ready. In the beginning, the idea is not to get too confused, but by just sticking to the main teaching. Otherwise, it gets confusing. Everybody's got their own teaching, and what you want to do is simplify. You simplify it by just going, well, what am I supposed to be doing? How does that work? And taking this on faith in the beginning, saying, well, it's been working for the last 2,000-3,000 years. There must be something about it that has some positive elements. Therefore, you take it on faith, and then as you move through these different perception points and through the nafs, you begin to see why. And you begin to feel that the truth is there, and the truth makes your heart happy. You see that without that, the heart is lost. It doesn't know what's going on. It doesn't know where to settle. It doesn't know where to direct itself. When you have a kind of compass and navigational help in this way of like, well, if you want to be closer to Allah, to the Creator, to your heart, here is a way to go. So you do this until you begin, the faith turns into trust, and the trust turns into surrender. And you begin to see everything that's happening here in this moment is meant for me to help me understand and be closer to my heart, or to my true self, or to Allah, however you want to say it. And these ideas are not the Quran alone. They also appear in the Torah, that's the 5 books of Moses, and the prophets. And those 2 books are what we call the Holy Bible. It's also in the Gospel, which is the New Testament. It's also very clearly stated in the Tao Te Ching, which is written by Lao Tzu about 500 BCE. The Bhagavad Gita, the Rig Veda, and the Mahabharata are the Hindu or Indian variations of the sacred texts. There's a whole lot more, but those are like the basic ones whose teachings are basically all the same. And I would say even with the, there's one called the Analects of Confucius. And in that it says, do not do unto others that which you do not want to have done to you. Which is also very similar to some of the teachings we have. There's also things like the teachings of Zoroaster, which is part of the basis for the Eastern religions, but it's where we get a lot of ideas that came into Islam.
Yeah, just a question, Shaykh. I understand from Sufi and Islam perspective, there's those four: Shariah, Tariqa, Haqqiqa, Maarifat. But generally speaking, is it possible to experience like Tariqa, Haqqiqa, and Maarifat without experiencing Shariah?
The only way I could see that happening is if you come into one of those as a hall and you realize, oh, I better get my act together. That's about the only thing, because no, as I understand it, it doesn't work otherwise. You can't work outside it. It's kind of like, here's the rules of the game. You want to play? Fine. Here's how it works. If you don't want to play, don't worry about it. But none of that other stuff will happen. It's kind of, to me, it's all integrated as a whole thing. I mean, we're looking at these as four different things, but in reality, they're what makes what we call insani kamil, integrated human being.
Got ya.
Okay, so then I kind of have a follow-up question to that. Someone could be very dogmatic about the way that they interpret what the Sharia is, and say, well, then that means that you need to pray 5 times a day and such, and you need to cross your T's and dot your I's and so on, and like basically take a very, maybe literal but very dogmatic approach to, I guess, the canon of sacred religious texts that are out there. And yet it would seem that that's not the aim here, in terms of being able to have this full experience. And also it seems counterproductive. So I guess what's the sort of dividing line to say this is, you're on the right track, or with Sharia or not, right? I guess it's a little bit of a fuzzy question, but does it make sense what I'm trying to ask?
When a way, like this happens in almost all spiritual communities, somebody decides that they know what's best. In Islam, for example, we don't have priests, popes, fathers, ministers. We have people who might lead prayer, but we don't have, and the reason why is because it's for thinking. You have to think for yourself. You make decisions for yourself. You're given all this information, but you decide what's right. When somebody, let's call them clerics, thinks that they have the answer, then what we have is what I call the God police. Nobody gave them a badge to be God's police. There is no compulsion in religion. That's what it says in the Quran. You don't compel anybody to do anything. If you do, then it's not done out of love. And if it's not done out of love, then it becomes the opposite.
Thank you, Sheikh. But I think my question's a little bit different, like on an individual basis.
Oh, okay.
I myself have fallen victim to, oh, it says you have to do it this way. I'm going to be very rigid. I have to do it that way.
But you're not a Catholic.
I don't know. Is Lutheran close enough? I don't know where that comes from, but that's
yeah.
And I have found that has been very counterproductive for me to have that approach. And it seems like oh, I better go all the way out. It's like, don't just tip my toe in. I better conform to the max. And I could see other people having that same approach, and so I guess, and then I look at life now, and there are plenty of things that I don't do that would be following the Shariah. So that's I guess the basis of my question. It's like, how can I put this? Like, what's right intention in terms of following Sharia? It's like pleasing Allah. We're doing things that we think Allah knows or Allah would be happy with.
The purpose is that you're trying to find a healthy balance. We like I was talking about before about paradoxes. We're in the world, and the world has to have things done in a certain way for us to continue to survive, which means we have to use our brain to work out the bills and when they need to be paid and how we're going to pay them. And we have all these other conditions for survival. When and how, and this is what Mui was asking, when and how do we get to being with Allah? The idea of Sharia is you find out what works for you now, and as you go through it, things become more and more clear. Yes, you can take on the absolute straitjacket of doing things every possibly perfect way. Sheikh Tanner used to talk about it in terms of the Quran is written for people, for many different kinds of people. He said, like for the first level, people want to know, tell me what you want me to do and what you don't want me to do. What's good and what's bad. I can follow that. So the Quran is written in that format. So good people do this, bad people do this. Which way do you want to go? But it also talks about in the Quran and in almost all the other sacred texts how people lived these lives by showing us through the prophets, for example, how you act as a human being within these contexts of like, what does that look like if I was to live that way? All right, well, here's Joseph, here's Job, here's Daniel, here's Jesus, here's Muhammad, here's these different characters who lived real lives. They were real human beings and are examples for us if we want to learn from analogy. This is what it's like. What happens, though, as you continue on and you go through from Sharia, you go into Tariqa and you go, okay, I want to do better at being a human being. So you accept the teachings. And as you do, you find that the path that you're on is getting a little more narrow of like what your heart is happy with and what it's not so happy with. That path gets narrower and narrower as you move through it. And you begin to realize that you don't have as much wiggle room as you used to have before. Why? Because Allah is compassionate and wants you to be close to Him. And therefore, it's wide open. Come on in. And as you go through it, you learn what makes your heart happy, where it finds peace. And it is through having a moral compass of like living ethically, compassionately, empathetically, and of service. So these feelings become more and more clear as you move through and offload nafs. The ship becomes a little lighter and a little more manageable.
Thank you for clarifying, Sheikh. I think the thing that I identified as what's going on is through the Sharia having this, let's say, litmus test of good versus bad. And then, oh, well, if I do these things, I must be good. And if I don't do those things, I must be bad. Therefore, I must follow exactly the good things. And that's going to lead me to something. But it's actually the way you're describing it's like this funnel where, and then it just, as it narrows, this other stuff will just naturally sort of take care of itself as a
exactly
kind of byproduct of that.
That's right. Yeah, and that's another genre of people, cadre, who want points to get to heaven. So they're counting points when they do prayer and when they do salat, when they do whatever they're doing. They give tithing and they give, because then I get good points. If I have enough points, it's like skill ball. You get enough tickets, you get into heaven. And it's kind of like, that's an interesting way to look at a spiritual path. The point system. Okay, that's another way to look at it. Of course, you can do that. The thing is that this has been spoken of a lot in Sufi stories, and they talk about it. And if you're doing it for you, then whatever points you get, that's the end of the transaction. You have made an investment and you've gotten the return. Deal is closed. It's different when you do things for Allah's sake, because you're not invested in the outcome. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You're doing it because you think Allah will be happy with it. Then that's a whole different deal. That means that you're doing it out of love. That is more of the Sufi way. Why do I do it? Because Allah is happy with it. Because Allah loves that kind of thing. Because I think Allah will love that. Because it also makes my heart happy to do it. It gives, in other words, rather than getting return on your investment, you get peace, joy, happiness, and love in your heart, which is kind of higher dividends, if you want to think of it that way.
No, I was just reflecting on that. Yeah, what you said about the whole points and reward system.
Yeah.
It's people's choice of looking at that way.
And that's perfectly fine. You're not making waves. You're not bothering other people. You're doing things because they seem to be like, you get points, your tickets, whatever way you want to think of it. And there's like I was saying before about the people who say this is how you should do it. You should only have this much hair exposed. You should stand with this kind of attitude here. This is how you do this prayer. This is how you stand here. We keep those people over there, and you do this here, and that makes you a good religious person, Muslim or Christian or whatever it is. That is, those people think that they're doing the right thing. But again, it's about them. Because they think they're doing God's work. Or something. In other words, though, it's kind of a different point system, but it's still points. I think in this one you get check marks. He brought 15 million people to Islam. Yes, he must be a saint or something. I don't know.
You're reminding me of there's a Netflix series called Midnight Mass. A big part of the premise of it is basically this whole thing you're talking about, but it leads people to this very, very dire outcome at the end.
Yes, there's an old Sufi story about a teacher who set himself up to lead people to the right way of life and felt that the world was coming to an end. So he brought his followers up to the top of a mountain and said, "We will pray, for the world is ending." And they prayed, and they just happened to be on top of a volcano, which blew. So yes, it did end for them. Good questions. Anything else? Anything else this brings up? Shariah, the bark of the tree. Tariqa, the leaves, gathering the sunlight, the light, and bringing it in to the branches. The branches are Haqqiqa, and the whole point is to get to the fruit. The tree is going to make fruit, and the fruit is something that we can live with and eat and become nutritious, receive nutrients from. In a way, Maarifat is, the experience is, it's difficult to live in that because of how this world is and how we have to provide for ourselves and keep things moving. But it gets easier towards, as you grow older, you have more time to think about these things. And the experience of living with Allah is as though the Quran or any of the sacred text is living. You are living it. Whatever is happening is perfect just as it is. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman-Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Salaam Alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Sheikh. Thank you, everyone.
Shukran, guys.
Shukran.
Salaam Alaykum. Salaam Alaykum, murids, seekers, curious, and interested listeners. We appreciate you and are happy to share our Sufi message. Your donation will help support our Sufi Center in Sydney, where we do zikr, sohbet, spiritual counseling, and healing services. We believe the message should be free, but it costs equipment, rental, services, software, and hardware to get this to you. So thank you for choosing our podcast among all the millions available. If you go to our website, AnsariSufiOrder.org, you will be able to donate through PayPal whatever you think this information is worth to you. Blessings and love, the Australian Ansari Sufi Order.